when I look at the history of life on Earth, as an astronomer, thinking about the possibilities of life out there, two enormous things jump out at me. One, life appeared fast. Simple life appeared. The Earth forms 4.6 billion years ago, and basically as soon as the Earth calms down, settles up, gets a haircut, straightens up, and actually has an ocean, you have life. And some of the very oldest rocks where we have clear evidence of liquid water, so there was an ocean around, we have chemical evidence, that early chemical evidence that there was life. So that's an interesting thing. But on the other hand, complex life took forever. Complex life took 3 billion years. I mean, look at that. Think about this. Life appears is clearly well established, one-celled algae sort of life in the oceans by 3.5 billion years ago, probably before that. But then big, interesting, I'm not interested in pond scum here. I want bigger life. I'm interested in life, you know, things that crawl around, things that swim around, things you can barbecue, for crying out loud. That's the life I'm interested in. And so when we look at this, my first thought is, look, for 3 billion years, life stays basically one-celled, microscopic, infinite, you know, just tiny little sorts of things like that. The most advanced form of life on the Earth is pond scum for 3 billion years, and then bam, you get the Cambrian period, 500 million years ago, 550 million years ago, where all of a sudden now you got interesting fossils and things, and then yada yada yada, dinosaurs, yada yada yada, me. Okay, so when I look at this as an astronomer thinking about the possibilities of life on Earth-like planets around other stars, one, I look at this and I say, maybe because life appeared fast, maybe, just maybe, that means if you've got the right chemicals, if you've got the right things bubbling around in the right sort of ocean, then maybe forming life is not that hard. I mean, obviously the biologists have not worked out the details of how you go from really complex chemistry to really simple biology. There's some details to be worked out there, believe you me. But geologically it happened fast. Because it happened so fast, I as an astronomer think, aha, maybe, however it happens, maybe it's not that hard. So maybe when we start looking at Earth-like planets around there, maybe basically every place, you got the right ocean, the right chemicals bubbling away, maybe all of them will have life. However, maybe the tough thing is multicellular life, complex multicellular life with a spinal cord and brains, you know, all this sort of stuff that we've got that even a simple organism has, but even a frog has, even a fish has, but maybe those are going to be the rare things. I mean, it took on the Earth 3 billion years of rolling those genetic dice, generation after generation after generation, trying to get the right mutation to get cells to work together in the right way in order to get organs and complex organisms. And let's face it, when you're a bacteria, a generation is not exactly a long time here. Maybe that's the tough thing. Maybe we're going to find thousands and thousands and thousands of planets where the most advanced life on them is pond scum. And then the really amazingly precious planets are going to be the ones where they have multicellular life. And I'm not even talking about intelligence. Holy cow, intelligent humans have been on the Earth for what, 100,000 years? Out of the Earth being here for like 4.5 billion years? That's the teeniest, tiniest, infinitesimallest, littlest fraction of things. My guess is we're going to, so just based on this, a wild hypothesis, no, I mean we have one case on this, the statistics are terrible, but my guess with this, maybe we're going to find lots of planets with one-celled organisms, a few, very few, 1 out of thousands with complex multicellular organisms, and then of course, somebody to talk to, that's going to be amazingly rare. Okay, cool. So we've learned from the Earth. Let's look out beyond the Earth. Where could we possibly find life here in our solar system? Okay, Mercury? No. No atmosphere, no liquid water. Forget it. Venus? Even worse. Hotter than Mercury. Terrible. Mars? Mars doesn't have enough atmosphere for liquid water, but Mars is very interesting because we see evidence of erosion on the surface. We see old dry lake beds, old dry river beds. We see evidence of past erosion. So here's the point. When life was forming in the young Earth's oceans, Mars was a relatively wet place too. It had volcanoes erupting, it had a thicker atmosphere, and so, past erosion by liquid water. And I guess the main thing here is, okay, so if life formed on the Earth, and at that time Mars wasn't that different than the Earth, Why not? Why shouldn't life have formed on Mars too? And the interesting thing about life here on Earth is life is tenacious. You can go anywhere on the Earth. You know, the driest desert, the hottest hot springs, anywhere you go on the Earth, you drill down underneath, 2 miles underneath the rocks on the Earth. You bring up rocks from 2 miles under the surface. You put your microscope on them and you've got tiny little bacteria on there living on them. If you're 2 miles under the surface, how do you know whether you're on the Earth or Mars? That's the point here, you know. So you look at this, past erosion, and so the question is, if life formed, could it still be there today? So first of all, why not form? And then if life on Mars was anything like life on Earth, it was tenacious like this, why not still today? Why not still today? And then it can't be on the surface. The surface, the top 6 inches are sterilized by solar radiation. And even then, you got to have enough pressure to have liquid water, so you got to be underground maybe places where there's some volcanic activity. Recently, we've discovered traces of methane gas in the atmosphere of Mars, which has been very interesting. On the Earth, methane is produced by methanogen bacteria. We don't know what it's being produced by on Mars. Methane can be produced by volcanic activity, but Mars was thought to be pretty much volcanically dead-ish. Maybe it's not, and even if that is volcanic methane, then a volcanic hotspot, underground would be a great place to look for bacteria clinging on, so we have methane and then all sorts of things. So right now we're looking at Mars. Mars is a great prospect for perhaps finding either fossils of ancient life, or perhaps even some one-celled living organisms living deep underground in volcanic warm spots. The other big spot in our solar system are the Jovian moons, particularly things like Europa. This is Jupiter's moon. And doesn't have an atmosphere. It's way out of the habitable zone, way out far from the sun. You could not have liquid water on the surface, but underneath a crust of ice, which is like many, many miles thick, there appears to be an ocean of liquid salt water, which is maybe 50 miles thick. So Jupiter's moon, it has a crust of ice, miles thick, but under it has an ocean of salt water, tens of miles thick. This is all circumstantial evidence. It's really hard to know for sure, but it has the right sort of magnetic field you'd expect from liquid salt water. The evidence looks pretty good. There are very few craters on the surface, so you've got liquid water seeping out, resurfacing things. The evidence is pretty. Circumstantial evidence is very good. And so the question is there life there? Because if we've got our calculations right, then Europa has had these oceans of liquid salt water under its crust of ice ever since the solar system formed. Europa is the same age as the Earth and Jupiter and everything else in our solar. It's 4.5 billion years old. So if you've had those oceans on Europa bubbling away with volcanic sources, and the right chemicals bubbling away for 4.5, if we get out there, we send a probe down there, it zips around a little bit, says those oceans are sterile, we just learned something about life in the universe. If you can have an ocean of liquid salt water bubbling away for 4.5 billion years and you don't get so much as a microbe forming, well then, that number one conclusion I mentioned a minute ago is obviously wrong, and that even forming very simple life is very hard. And of course, if we found something, well, that would be cool too. I'm not necessarily expecting anything swimming around there, but it's evolution a long time. Maybe some interesting pond scum. And I want to know, is it similar to us? Is it exactly like us chemically? Does it have DNA and RNA or proteins and all this? Or is it similar to that? Or is it totally different? Are there other ways for life to... We could learn tons of that. Give us one cell. One tiny little cell. And good grief, that would keep hundreds of scientists busy for decades working out the exact biochemistry of this, on whether it's similar or different or anything like this. And of course, where we're really going is Earth-like planets around other stars. Earth-like planets around other stars. And that is really, really hard. It is amazingly hard to find a planet orbiting around another star because Stars are bright and planets aren't. The sun gives off 1 billion times more light than the Earth does. So that's really, really hard to find. You know, extrasolar planets, and people are looking for, you know, Jupiter-sized planets based on the tugs of there, all that sort of thing. Forget it. If we want to find Earth-like planets, NASA's Kepler mission was all about that. Kepler mission, looking for Earth-like planets based on when they would pass in front of their sun. And then they would transit in front of their star, and it would block out, you know, 0.01% of the star's brightness. And if this would happen regularly on, you know, if you were looking at the Earth, once a year the Earth would pass in front of the sun for about 12 hours. And if you could see that happening again and again and again, and the Kepler mission has found Earth-like planets, found them. It has found Earth-sized planets, almost all the way down to the size of the Earth, and so we know they exist. We know that Earth-like planets exist out there in habitable zones around other planets. Kepler by itself is not able to then find the details of that, but the next step is to then send up a mission and to study the chemical composition of these planets' atmosphere. So we're going to need a much bigger telescope, much more powerful. And so when one of these planets, which Kepler has found, one of these Earth-like planets in the habitable zone that Kepler has found, when one of those passes in front of its star, some of that star's light, well, you know, some of it's blocked. First of all, some of it just comes straight to us. Some of it's blocked by the rock of the planet. And if the planet has an atmosphere, some of the star's light will pass through that atmosphere. And it will happen again and again and again. And when what we'll do is we will look for absorption lines from the planet's atmosphere. Planet's atmosphere. When we do that, if we can find them, if we can actually get, I mean, this is going to be a heroic effort of science to try to actually do this, but if we can measure absorption lines from that planet's, from the small, tiny quantity of that star's light which will pass through the planet's atmosphere like a donut around the planet, if we can measure those absorption lines, then we can measure the chemical composition of the planet's atmosphere. And we're going to be looking for oxygen. That's what we're going to do, oxygen and water, because, you know, water vapor in the atmosphere verifies, okay, we have oceans there, and then and oxygen. There's one major source of oxygen in our entire solar system. There's no oxygen in, you know, O2, oxygen by itself on Venus or Jupiter or anything like that, because oxygen is a fantastically reactive chemical. You put oxygen near iron, it makes rust. You put oxygen near carbon, it makes carbon dioxide. Oxygen loves to stick to things. You don't find it isolated by itself except here on Earth, as a result of photosynthesis. That's the only major source of oxygen in our entire solar system, is green plants' photosynthesis. If we find an Earth-like planet in the habitable zone of its star, we verify that there's water vapor going on in the atmosphere, and then we find oxygen. Wow. That will be considered strong evidence that there's photosynthesis, that there are living organisms on that planet. It doesn't tell us much about what they are, but that's the headline I'm looking for in the next generation. Finding an Earth-like planet around a sun-like star in its habitable zone, and it has oxygen in its atmosphere. You know, we've got like, what, 20-something% oxygen in ours. If we find something like that in another planet, that will be considered strong evidence for life. One more thing I got to mention. Okay, so everybody that asks me, you know, all this, okay, you're optimistic about this. So do you believe in UFOs? And the first thing I got to do is I got to say, well, first of all, science is not about what we believe. Who cares what I believe? It's not an issue of I mean, what does it matter whether I believe it or not? I can believe the moon is made of green cheese. It doesn't change what the moon is. I can believe in the tooth fairy. It doesn't change the reality of things. Nobody asks me the scientific question. A scientist would ask the question, wouldn't ask me what I believe. The scientist says, what's the evidence we have that UFOs are alien spacecraft? And the question answers itself. We don't have anything. We don't have anything solid. There's interesting stuff and all sorts of interesting reports, but hey, science is about stuff that can be double-checked and measured and verified, triple-checked up, you know, up and down and backwards 6 ways from Sunday. We don't have that. And so I can't take that very seriously. And the other bit is the stars are fantastically far away. It would take NASA's very best space probes, you know, hundreds of thousands of years to reach even the nearest stars. At this point, I'm thinking travel to other stars is way out of any technology I can foresee. So I'm really skeptical about, you know, UFO sort of stuff like that. I'm optimistic that we may find life on Earth-like planets using telescopes from here. And that would be amazing.